Alright, I decided to create this video for my VW classic car. Anybody who is come across a similar question. So the other day I was selling a part to a friend of mine, and he asked me the question, which it's actually been a common question: how much did you pay to register your VW? Now I have a 71 VW with a Subaru engine in it, a ton of mods, little mods to it, and I paid $140 to transfer and register my Beetle. Now I've had a lot of people tell me that this was ridiculous amount of money because it's so cheap. You know, I've heard of people paying up to $800 just to register their vehicle. Um, and I know exactly what the issue is. Now, when I bought my Beetle, it was last registered in 1998, and the previous owner didn't put it in non-op. It broke down, and they basically gave it to their nephew, and their nephew tried to fix it, but didn't really know anything about Beetles, and I bought it and ended up fixing it. When I went to the DMV to get it registered, they wanted, I think, a little over $400 because of the late fees and taxes and all that good stuff. What I found, because I used a trick that helped me with many other vehicles. I've used it on motorcycles. I've used it on my old truck. I've bought like 3 trucks, and every old trucks, and every time I've had to use this. If you don't know, you need what's called a statement of fact. In California, it's called Statement of Facts Reg 256. You can get the form from the DMV website, or you can find it at the DMV. Now, this is in any state. I did this in Connecticut, I did this in Illinois, I did this in California, and it works. Every state has a statement of facts. Now, officially, a statement of facts is a form that is used to verify in a variety of situations, such as, or not limited to, use for tax exemption, smog exemption, transfers and titles only, window decals, wheelchair lifts, wheelchair carriers, vehicle body changes, name statements, or aka ownership certification, and random statements of fact. And that, as well as the tax exemption and smog exemption, or whatever exemption you can think of, is exactly why you're going to use a statement of fact. Now, what I did on my Beetle is I went to the DMV and I told them that I had purchased it secondhand, and that the previous owner had the car, it broke down, they decided to try and repair and restore the car, and it was neglected, and because of that it just sat, and they forgot to put it in non-op. Now, I filled that out under statement of facts, and because I said this, I was able to purchase the car, and they were able to waive all of the late fees on the car and all of the old taxes to get it reinstated. I was able to keep the original plates, the original titles, all that stuff, because I had that all intact. If you could lose the plates, then you have to fill out some other stuff and get that all transferred differently. I did this with an old 81 K5 Blazer back in Connecticut. I bought that truck, and the previous owner again had it sitting, never put it in non-op. I purchased it. They wanted around $300 and change to register it. I went and filed a statement of fact saying similar things. Previous owner had parked it with intent to restore and forgot to put it in non-op. The main thing about statement of facts is you want to make it seem like it's out of your hands, like it was something that was done by someone that was out of your control, and if it was in your control, you would have gotten it registered or fixed at an appropriate time as to not incur extra fees. I had a friend who had a truck who did the same thing. He had the truck sitting for a long time, forgot to put it in non-op, and I told him to go get a statement of fact, and sure enough, he got a statement of fact, And he basically just said on his statement of fact that the car was in the possession of a family member who was planning to restore the vehicle and forgot to put it in non-op. It was not in his possession, so he could not register it. They typically just ask for the previous owner, but honestly, I just went and I just signed it, went back the next day, and filed the statement of fact. And sure enough, didn't have to pay an extra dime, no problem. Obviously, you want to keep it to a more rational thing, such as previous owner neglect, or was sitting for restoration and was never filed correctly. By doing this, you have to ask for it. They will never tell you. They'll never tell you to ask for a statement of fact. You have to ask them. A good way is just to say that you called the DMV, you told them about the situation, and they told you to file a statement of fact. And I've had it accepted every time. We even had a situation where my mother registered a car in her name and gave it to my brother. Now, my brother was driving it, and he had re-registered the car, but he forgot to pay the taxes on it, and the taxes were due. When she went to go register her car, they wanted her to pay the taxes for the car that was in her name that belonged to my brother. She filled out a statement of fact saying that the car was not in her possession, it belonged to, her son, and that she wanted an exemption for the taxes. And sure enough, they waived the tax fee and allowed her to register her car without paying the old taxes on the other car that was in her name. They didn't even ask her to change anything. You can use the statement of fact as well for release, for any sort of release of liability. For example, you sell a vehicle, the person crashes the vehicle or causes some sort of damage, you get, a ticket or a bill. And it goes on your DMV record. You can use a statement of fact to have that changed as well. On the other hand, I also had a friend who decided to change the motor on his car. And this was not a new car. This was not an old car. This was a new car. He had a Honda Civic, and he decided to put a JDM motor. And what he did was he went to get an exemption, a smog exemption, using a statement of fact. And he basically argued that because of finances and the ability to get the specific parts to use a factory rebuild for his current motor that had blown up, it would have cost him a large amount of money, and in turn had to resort to changing the motor. And because of that, his body and his motor never would match or meet the exact smog specifications. And by doing this, he was able to submit a statement of fact and get his car smog exempt. Yeah, and this is not an old car. It's like a 90-something Honda Civic that he decided to just buy a big JDM motor for and throw in, and brought it, got it inspected, submitted a statement of fact, and boom, smog exempt car. So, if you're going to buy a used Beetle, used car, any sort of deal that may have large back fees, back taxes, you can always submit a statement of facts. You have to tell them that the reason that it was not done was out of your control. And another good way is to tell them that you purchased the vehicle unknowing that there were such large fees. Maybe you can say the previous buyer deceived you. I actually had that happen with a motorcycle, where I purchased a motorcycle and it had a current tag on it, a current registration sticker on it. I went to the DMV to register it, to find out that the person hadn't registered it for almost 2 years, and they had illegally put a current sticker on it. And I ended up submitting a statement of fact saying that I only purchased the vehicle because I thought it was in current standing and that there were no back fees. And just by submitting that statement of fact, they waived all of the back fees, and I didn't have to pay anything extra. All I paid was the standard registration and transfer title fees. So I hope this helps any of my Beetle friends. I know I've gotten this question at least like 5 or 6 times, just hanging out with friends and people looking at my Beetle. How much did you pay to register your Beetle? So just remember, file a statement of fact whenever you're registering a car that's been out of the system for a bit, that may have large back fees. You can do this with any vehicle, and you must tell them that it was out of your control. It was unbeknownst to the previous owner that they could file this paper, that they were able to file that paperwork, and you can request to have those fees waived. You have to request it. They will never tell you that you can do this, but if you request it, it will work for you. I've done it on like 6 vehicles now, and every time it works. Do this, and it will save you hundreds of dollars.